This is Aaron Levine, LG Insurance, with another episode of the And Insurance podcast. I don't know if we're going to get to the insurance piece of things today because I've got two phenomenal guests from a single great organization that do so many cool things that we're just going to see where this whole episode takes us. Carrie and Lauren from Brand Groupies, thanks so much for coming in the studio today to sit down and chat a little bit about what you do and how things get tied together in the PR and branding world. And honestly, this is a great way for me to get free advice by doing a little promotion on the YouTube and the podcast and wherever else this thing gets posted. It's great to have you both. Carrie, we've had many times on the microphone together. I did get the opportunity to sit on the red couch and be on the Brand Groupies podcast, although we recorded it on the purple couch at a shared universe. Shout out to Ming Chen. That was a lot of fun. That was COVID. We had masks. Yes. I did have tequila.
We did have tequila.
I did not bring a proper beverage today. I'm sorry. I owe you.
Yeah.
Lauren, good to see you.
Good to see you,
Lauren, give us some background on the Brand Groupies and what do you guys do?
Sure. So we work with B2B brands across architecture, design, professional services, and we work on their social media, their PR, and their personal branding. Carrie always, says as the founder of Brand Groupies, we always take our clients and make them the rock stars of their industry.
Yes. Whether it's a traditional, industry or not, we say, be the Mick Jagger of your industry.
Which is great. So you have one client that stands out because we were talking about him not too long ago. Sure. He's an architect, right?
Yes.
And they have a couple of different offices in New York and New Jersey. Tell me about what you've done for that and the podcast that you created for them.
Sure. Well, Mancini Duffy has been around for over 100 years. And when we came on board nearly 6 years ago, we started, rebranding with the website, took over the social media, then started public relations. And, now we also do personal branding for their C-suite leaders, including the president and co-owner Christian Giordano. And most recently launched the Anti-Architect podcast, where he talks to, industry leaders about what's going on in the industry and how they're disrupting, an industry that is ripe for change and technology and, continued innovation. So
I hate this disruption word because I hear it every day in insurance, right?
Yes.
Oh, the next disruptor, and it's to me a lot of it is bullshit. No offense, but the Anti-Architect podcast makes me want to listen to it, right?
Exactly.
I don't want to listen to architects today, right? Like that's not happening. But the Anti-Architect, like how do we try to mix it up and do things a little bit different?
Sure.
is awesome, and that's where the Brand Groupies comes in.
Yes.
That's exactly right. Looking at things through a different lens, especially traditional industries that are probably not accustomed to our services. If you kind of partner with us, we see that it really helps these brands stand out within the industry because so many of their competition are not making the investment. They're not really paying attention to their social channels. They're not using the visibility factor from a PR lens to grow their reach and expose their company and their C-suite leaders to new audiences to help fuel their growth.
Which is what you really do well, right? You take the business, but then you also profile the business leaders, which is something that, I'm a huge fan of, right? Personal branding.
Yes, and you're so good at it, Aaron.
You are.
And then we have Abby behind the scenes
Abby.
today.
Yes, hi,
she's going to
Abby.
come in and she's going to work on some of that stuff for us as well, right? Also help me to increase my personal brand and my profile across the social channels. So I mean, it's such an important factor for a business owner to not just promote the business, but to promote themselves.
Sure.
And having the right team behind you to do that is super important. So tell me, where did Brand Groupies start? And then obviously I want to know where you're going next.
Well, you hit it on the head with, getting the people behind the brands out there, you know, and our clients will hear it. They're on the golf course. They're, you know, in meetings, and people will say, you know, I listened to the podcast, or I saw you in that article. And sometimes it's hard to measure the ROI, but they know it. They're feeling the results. They're growing. They're getting more, you know, RFPs in. So it's, you know, so that's been incredible. But it's interesting, you know, the journey that Brand Groupies has taken. I think when we launched in 2015, we were doing everything, you know, events, social, podcasts, you know, websites, everything that anyone needed. And then we realized, you know, what really moves the needle. And we realized that as much as we loved being a groupie, like going in and consulting, like in and out, you know, giving it all, but realized that to grow the company and scale, we really needed to work on retainer, you know, contracts, and, you know, have that cash flow coming in so that we could build, you know, our A-list team. And that's been our focus, to really have the best of the best. Everyone we work with has been in the industry for, you know, I'd say over 20 years. They all, you know, most of them have worked in the city with major global brands, and we have high standards for the work that we do. So we've really morphed in, and we've realized to social media, public relations, and personal branding, because we have seen that move the needle, and we've seen our clients' businesses grow by really investing in social media and PR, because one fuels the other. And it's, you know, gone are the days where you're just investing in, you know, one or the other. And, you know, now it has to fuse together. We're constantly in sync and moving fast. You know how fast social moves these days. We're like, okay, now we're going to do a reel, and we have to have the same messaging that we put out in the, you know, the press release, and we're just like,
That's
boom,
so much
bang,
work.
boom. It's so
much work.
It has doubled the amount of time and investment,
Right.
yeah, on all of it.
The amount of investment a business has to make in that segment is ridiculous.
Yes.
You know, not to mention all the other issues that businesses are having today, you know, with keeping employees, you know, getting new customers, all the additional noise that we're competing against and with on a consistent and regular basis. You know, the PR and social combination, I think, is a huge 1-2 punch for any smart business professional, so to speak. You know, the PR thing, I think I've done some of it. Definitely need to do more of it. We've had conversations around it. One of these days we'll get into it.
Yes.
You know, the social we do pretty well at, but we're gonna up our game on that. And you know, I always wanted a sales team, but honestly, my sales team is becoming, unfortunately, more digital.
Yeah.
As we try to reach new people,
Sure.
and continue on this podcast journey, while, you know, interviewing great guests, learning new things, making super connections where we can have meetings on the beach after we're done podcasting. It doesn't get much better than that.
No.
You know, that
No, it doesn't.
We're enjoying the way the summer is today.
Yes.
So what's next on the horizon for the Brand Groupies?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, as far as PR has evolved so much, and Lauren can talk about, you know, getting our clients on podcasts, which has been huge.
It has been. It's actually, you know, when I started out in PR about 20 years ago, it was all about print media. And of course, it still plays a role in our strategy. However, that market has been shrinking, and kind of what's slowly overtaken that, you know, after the digital craze, has been podcasts. So a huge part of what we do, I think, when we look to kind of qualify businesses as a good partner for us, we always look to see if they have a dynamic face or faces behind the brand to tell the story. Nice. We came from a fashion background, and I think telling that narrative by bringing the faces behind the brand to the forefront was the way that we were taught how to make the consumer and other business partners connect with the brand, what sets you apart. And what we find is a lot of our clients are very, you know, they're very dynamic. They are visionaries, and they're leaders within their industries. And while sometimes an article or answering interview questions over email can be a bit daunting, of course, we're there to help and support through that process. They can get on a podcast and speak all day long about the topics that fuel them and drive them from a day-to-day business perspective. So Where the So PR really plays into that is getting our clients to be more visible on podcasts. And then Carrie takes, maybe 30 to 45-minute podcast, and she can walk away with 3 or 4 clips and timestamps of our leaders saying in their own words what makes their business different. And so that fusion of the two really kind of goes hand in hand in terms of how we approach our clients and raising them to the next level. And we've seen so many opportunities come from podcasts. I've had so many people reach out to say, hey, I didn't know about this person, but then I listened to this podcast and that led me to their business. And we'd love to interview them for X, Y, and Z. Or maybe we'd love to tap them to be on a panel this fall. So the circuit that goes around podcasts, most podcasters are business leaders. They're actually not podcasters by day and night. This is kind of a side hustle for them. And so
I don't even know if it's a side hustle. I'm spending money here.
Yeah.
The side hustle should be making me money. But anyway.
We really view it as a marketing leg.
Yes,
this is a new marketing, something that's been added into that marketing spoke. And for us, we find that the relationships that come from that often translate into other opportunities that you may not even been able to imagine when initially I reached out to pitch the podcast host.
Yes.
So I love this So
Yeah.
PR thing. Have you trademarked that? Has
It's
that been
on the list.
Has
It's
that
on the
has that been
list.
done? Can you have
We've
it
been
done
talking about
within
it.
the next 2 weeks before
Yes.
this goes
Yeah,
live?
I know,
Because,
I know.
that's going everywhere. The
Yes.
So PR.
So
I love that.
PR.
That's awesome.
Yes.
And the podcasts are great.
Believe in
Being
it.
a guest, but as a business owner that doesn't have the brand groupies behind them, right? Give advice
Yes.
to the business owner that doesn't have a ton of time. They don't have to start a
Yeah.
podcast. Don't start your own podcast. Like seriously, there are so many out there.
Yes.
Find a few and just take that content and then reshare it as your own, because every podcaster wants you to reshare it, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
one of the biggest things.
Sure.
Definitely.
That's where we get our biggest boost, is when other people share our content,
Yes.
with them as guests on this podcast or any other. Like, I feel like this is my 3rd iteration of podcast.
Yeah.
Andrew and I were doing
evolving.
Totally Local.
Yes.
Yes,
Carrie was
I
a guest
remember.
on Totally Local. We did it at
Yes.
the 10th Avenue Burrito
Yeah, that was
with
so
Brian
fun.
Katz.
That was great.
Yes.
I think that was a
Tequila tasting.
2-hour episode of drinking tequila. And they were
my
all
gosh.
talking music, and I was kind of fading out
Yeah.
because, Following the Dead is not my thing.
Yeah.
But, it was such a great conversation
It was.
with some cool people. So I look back at some of those original, those podcasts that we started doing, and there's some great content out there.
Yes.
Just got to re-grab it and reshare it, because
Yes.
you can always re-grab and reshare. Because nobody remembers the post you made last month, let
No.
alone 2 years ago.
Exactly
Exactly.
We can always get that content. Andrew, if you're
Yes.
watching, can you loop that one back, please? I'd appreciate it.
Purpose.
You know what? We also see it as a small investment. So you might invest
Yes.
33 or 37 minutes of your time to be on a podcast, but then that one conversation can be viewed and listened to by thousands of people once you share it through SoundCloud, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google
Co-promote.
Podcasts, and then you co-promote it with the guest and their network, and then you share it on social, all of those platforms.
Yes.
So it's a very small investment time-wise for a very, very big return.
Yeah,
on
LinkedIn and
exposure.
YouTube are where we look mostly. I don't even
Yeah.
check
Yeah.
the actual podcast downloads. Like I don't look.
Sure.
I've never looked. I don't really
Yes.
care to look.
No.
Because, smallest viable audience
Yes.
is fine.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to look at those little numbers,
I
because they're
know.
definitely small. Who
Well,
wants
you
to
get-
listen to me talk? Like serious in their car. I mean,
You
come
get
on. Now.
views on, on
You do on
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn, on Instagram,
and
through
even as a
Reels.
smaller podcast, like a mid-sized podcast, if you have a few hundred listens, you're in the top
50% on Apple
of all
Podcasts.
podcasts. Like
Which
you
is
really
crazy.
It's
are.
wild. Yeah.
So
and there's
really-
only the 1% or the people that have 5 to 10,000 plus listeners per episode. That's 1 to 5% of all
Right.
podcasts.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you're mostly knocking
All
it
right.
out
So
of the
what
park. with those.
podcasts are you two listening to when you're not busy producing and, renegotiating people's podcast contracts?
A massive
so
part of my
many.
job is listening to podcasts.
Oh,
Literally, I'm
yes.
constantly vetting podcasts for my clients.
Awesome.
And
Yes.
listening to the host, is the tone correct? What do we have in common? Huge part of what what my team and I do is listen and discover new
Yes.
podcasts.
Yes.
It's interesting because it's different from traditional media where you go back to the same, you have the same reporter over and
Right.
over
Yes.
again. Podcasts, you're going out with new opportunities. And then, of course, there's an opportunity as you work with different leaders within the same space to
Sure.
go back and
Yes.
say, hey, I just started working with so-and-so. A big part of what I do
Totally.
is
So
just
one of
listening.
my favorites and kind of the reason why that I like this podcast format and it's super short.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's short on purpose is Seth Godin's Akimbo podcast is one of my favorites. I
Yeah.
think he puts it out weekly.
Yeah.
It's a solo rant, never an interview, but
And
it's
it's good.
legitimately 14 minutes long at the most.
Yes,
Yes.
that's awesome.
Right.
all
So
people
it's
time.
consumable content. Like there was one podcast that I saw a great title on. I forget who was the host.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was 27 minutes of them talking about the football game last night
know.
and fluff. And I'm like, you just
You don't-
wasted 27 minutes of my time.
I know.
I'm not interested in that. I
Yes.
clicked on this because I saw a cool title.
Yes.
You reeled me in. Now
Yes.
give me what I'm looking for
Give your value.
instead of just talking. But if that's what you want to do, that's what you're going to do. But I'm never going to listen to that
Well,
podcast again.
yeah.
Right.
Right. I
Find
want to get it
someone
out there and
wonderful.
put consumable content out there in a time that people will actually consume it. And
Yes.
I'm not in the car that often, so I don't like hour-long podcasts.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
It's too
Makes
much.
sense.
It's too
I think
much.
everything can get done in a short period of time. Although
You're right.
James Altucher is another one that I like. He does about an hour whenever he's doing, but his interviews are amazing. He's one of the best
Right.
interviewers I've ever
Oh,
listened
I'll have
to.
to check that one out.
He asks the best questions out there. Like he's a phenomenal interviewer. He's a little wild. He's a little crazy.
Yes.
But just his interview skills are second to none. So James Altucher show, listen to
I'll check
that.
that
That's a
out.
good one. I mean, he's probably
Yeah.
he's probably in the top 1%.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, he's got millions of downloads
Yeah.
on his stuff. So Carrie,
That's
what
awesome.
podcast do you listen to?
So my favorite guy is Mark Schaefer. Is it Make Your Mark? I forget the name of the
Yeah,
podcast.
Make Your
I
Mark.
belong to all of his newsletters and this.
Okay.
And he always has incredible tips. Like one of the recent podcasts he had, like he had a guest on and they would rank all marketing initiatives, like podcast, newsletter, like what are the cutting edge
Nice.
trends and what should people be focusing on?
Right.
You know, and personal branding is like his number one thing.
Okay.
It's like, you know, you really need to be focusing your energy on that and, you know, talking about because there's so many different initiatives and marketing initiatives. Even us we have to explain to people the difference between PR and, you know, digital marketing and, you know, experiential marketing and,
Yes.
Right.
and social and then social ads and SEO.
It's confusing,
It is
right?
so overwhelming.
It
And
is.
where do you spend your money?
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
and really, you know, have the
Biggest
your
bang
best bang for your buck. So I find incredible value in Mark Schaefer.
Okay.
He wrote the book Known,
Okay.
saying that you just have to be known, even if it's in, like you said, the smallest viable market.
Right.
Was it Seth Godin who said the smallest viable
No,
market?
that's Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Okay.
Okay, because
Gary
that's
Vee.
like
We love Gary Vee.
Yes. So, you know, it's really being known. And we always say to people, like, don't try to go national. Like, does every single person in your town know about your business?
Right.
Your kid's school, your gym? Like, you know, like, become known and become famous in a small area. And then,
Makes sense.
you know, then grow and evolve from there.
But when a business thinks, right, so we took on this podcast track, which is great. But going back to the PR piece of it, right? So now podcast
Yeah.
is a piece of the PR,
Yes.
Yes.
right? But
Absolutely.
a business owner is going to be like, well, it's a podcast. It's not PR. It's not the news article write up in
Sure.
the industry magazine or, you know, forget about the Wall Street Journal or any traditional media. How do you bridge into traditional media, or do you talk people out of worrying about traditional media because of that smallest viable audience piece of the puzzle?
I think it's a fusion of both. I think we do all different components, and throughout the PR strategy, as we have news, we go out to the industry. We've also had many of our clients then become kind of the go-to resource for certain publications.
Okay.
Or we've also had them start writing articles themselves on a monthly or a quarterly basis for trade articles, because that, or, you know, trade publications, because that then helps to get them out there. So I don't think it's a one or the other approach.
Right.
I think podcasts can be kind of an evergreen approach all year long. It could be industry specific, but then there's also so many that target, What does your company culture look like? How did you become an entrepreneur? What are your leadership tips? So we always like to do press both inside and outside of the industry for our clients because we feel like that approach exposes the business and the company to such a broader audience.
Yeah, like Lauren got one of our CFOs in Forbes last week, and that evolved from connections and a podcast and the whole, it's a momentum game.
Okay.
Exactly.
And that was a huge.
And people doing
huge
interviews
win.
want to interview people that want to be interviewed.
Exactly. And,
Yes.
and probably 3 years ago, I don't know that would have been a possibility, but
Right.
because over the last several years, we've been able to increase her visibility and her reach, she became an attractive person to be interviewed for this Forbes' CFO Insights, this ongoing series by someone
cool.
else who is a business writer. He's writing a column for them on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, the orbit of him, they're having side conversations and what else can they do together from a CFO lens. So the tentacles of podcasts can be very
yes.
far-reaching, much
go
more
anywhere.
than like what the obvious might seem.
Right.
Yeah, and consistency.
Yes.
It's just having consistency. I think a lot of people think, I can do, this in-house. Oh, I'm just going to assign, this one to do a post or this one to reach out. And it falls flat because everyone's so busy. You have to,
Sure.
it's really a full-time job. It's all about
Well,
consistency.
and there's a reason why we use a professional studio, right?
Yes.
Like we come
Yes.
into a studio that's set
Yeah.
up. All I have to do is show up and talk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No
Yes.
offense to you two, but I didn't
Yeah.
really prepare too much.
Yeah.
And I don't think you did either because we
No.
knew how the conversation was just
Yes.
going to kind of roll with it.
Yeah.
But some business owners struggle with being able to write and create content.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that, in my industry where I was running a committee and I charged everybody on my committee to write blog posts.
Yeah.
But it was impossible to get some people to
Yes.
actually put
I
pen
know.
to paper
Yes.
or fingers to keyboard or whatever you call it nowadays. And I'm like, listen,
Yeah.
3 paragraphs. That's all I need. Put
Yes.
your thoughts down.
Yes.
I will have an editor edit it
Yeah.
and sharpen it and tighten it
Yes.
and make it a little bit more keyword rich.
Sure.
But put your thoughts down on because your unique thoughts are what's most important. So do you help people with editing services too, I'm sure?
Yes.
Oh, yes, we
Yes.
do.
'Cause I can't imagine you getting
Lauren's
these
like
CFOs
zhuzhing.
to actually, write a proper article.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
my last name is Janess. When we say Lauren
Lauren
Janess, I
zhuzh.
zhuzh. I zhuzh it all out. And I'm a very fast typer.
Yes.
It's one of my superpowers. So I actually do most interviews on the
Awesome.
phone.
Okay.
And they speak, and I furiously type, and then I go back and I zhuzh it up. And that's kind of the 360 behind the scenes.
Yes.
So cool. Abby,
Yeah.
you
How it all
taking notes?
happens. Yeah.
Yes.
Abby's got a lot of work cut out for her, but
Yes.
we're gonna get her to sit down with the two of you
Yeah,
again soon.
definitely.
Yeah,
We'd
no,
love
for
to
sure.
help.
And I know you mentioned getting, the team involved. We found that a simple way to get the team involved is like a LinkedIn ambassador program. So,
Oh.
we'll go in and literally, on LinkedIn, if you do a post, you can say notify all employees so
Right.
that it comes up in their feed. And we do a lot of, internal ambassador programs where we train them. And, it's so simple. If your team shares, likes, comments, the social post, because then it just helps with the algorithms, and they just have to hit one.
And you've already
You know
written
what? I'm
it. You've
not
already
even
done
gonna-
the
I'm not even going to
assets.
comment on that. My team's not going to watch this far anyway down the video, but the
Yes.
chances of them actually
Yes.
doing that are fine. And you know what? I don't want them on LinkedIn anyway because
Yeah.
it's just recruiters and
Oh,
spam.
well,
so,
yeah, I mean-
we'll have that LinkedIn conversation another day.
another time.
Another time.
We're
We'll put that
trying
one
to
off
think
the
of
record.
what's the easiest way to get,
Exposure.
exposure.
I'm lucky enough I have a significant following on LinkedIn that I don't have to worry about those 2 and 3 internal likes to help get something a little bit more traction. So what else do you have for me? What else do you want to share before we shut it down?
Let's see. So, what is
I guess
our...
I think our biggest takeaway is that it's a
Yeah.
momentum game, right?
Yes.
That's why we work on that.
Consistency is key.
Yes,
Consistency,
and
be
for
consistent
the long term, and what we do is, we kind of where we've gotten with our clients, it didn't happen overnight, and it's starting with one face of the brand. So, Aaron, you're doing an incredible job. Just shout out to you and
You
your
are.
team because you're really, and we talked about this on the Brand Groupies podcast.
Right.
You're so good, and you're so good at like taking quick videos in the car, and it's just quick and sharing, value, I think is good. But we also, talk about starting with one face of the brand. Like now, for one of our clients, I think we're promoting like 5 to 6
Wow.
people from the leadership team, but different levels, like the primary
That's awesome.
team,
And then a
C-suite,
secondary team.
then we have the secondary team, but they all have different angles, so we're hitting all
Right.
different types of
And they have different
press.
networks.
And they have
They
different
do.
networks.
And they have
Right.
different topics. that
And,
they discuss.
from technology to talent acquisition and things like that. So I think it's just starting with the face of the brand and getting that, person out live, even if it's just a quick, IG live, like once a week. You just have to be consistent and continuously, evolve, and that's our
Pivot.
momentum.
Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. So listen, if you have any clients that should be sitting where you're sitting,
Yes.
talking to me, we can put them in the hot seat.
Thank
so
you.
Carrie
Yes.
Lauren, I thank you so much for joining me
thank
today.
you.
Oh,
Thank
so
you
much
so
fun,
great to
Erin.
see
Thank
you.
you.
So
It was
much
awesome.
And
pleasure.
I'm
So
sure we'll
fun.
be doing this again soon.
Yes.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.